Dit is Ergens Oog Radio. Een andere kijk op de wereld. You're listening to Pateo Radio.
Welcome listeners to another episode of Pateo Radio, brought to you live from the Netherlands. My name is Johan Oldenkamp, I'm your host tonight, and the guest of tonight is coming from South Africa, and the guest is Mr. Michael Tellinger. Michael, please welcome into the show.
Hello Johan, lovely to be speaking to you.
Yeah, it's great that you are available and that you can talk with us. Can you introduce yourself a little bit to the listeners? I know you do a lot of stuff, but just focus on a few things and then we'll have a talk.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I'm a scientist trained in the field of pharmaceutics. I've spent most of my life wondering about the origins of humankind, starting from an early childhood. Once I studied pharmaceutics at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, the sort of premier South African university, I started questioning some of the things that didn't make any sense in science and physics and chemistry and especially in genetics, and wondering why we use so little of our DNA. Obviously, like millions of people around the world, been wondering about who we are, where we come from, and why we're here, and doing a lot of research into that area. In 2005, I sat down and I started writing a book called Slave Species of God, and that has now become a bit of a cult book around the world. It's just been re-released and re-edited by Bear & Co. Inner Traditions in Vermont, USA, and I trust it'll be translated into various other languages now as well. But what I didn't expect was, after releasing Slave Species of God, or now called Slave Species of the Gods, that I would actually stumble upon and discover the physical evidence of what was left behind by the so-called gods of the olden days, the Anunnaki and the vast gold mining empire left behind here in southern Africa. And that's really been my main focus of my research for the last 5 years, since about 2007, and presenting physical evidence and reaching conclusions regarding the millions of stone ruins scattered around southern Africa, about the vanished civilizations of southern Africa linked to the presence of the Anunnaki, or the so-called biblical gods, on planet Earth, their obsession with gold, and pretty much presenting the physical evidence for much of what Zecharia Sitchin has been writing about and wrote about most of his life. And that's where we are today. I present evidence of advanced technology, knowledge of the laws of nature, and using sound frequencies and sound energy by these ancient civilizations, and I guess we can talk a lot more about that.
Yeah, we have so many subjects I'd like to talk about with you, but we'll just go ahead. In my announcement in the Dutch version, I said that you are the real-life Indiana Jones, because you actually do all the archaeological work, and you come with proof for the theories you have. So, I think you do really fascinating work. Let's talk about Zecharia Sitchin for a little bit. Because a lot of people try to debunk him and say that his interpretation of the Cunaean form, the clay tablets, is wrong. What is your view on this?
Well, whoever is trying to debunk him is just have their own interpretation and their own views. Here's a man that devoted his entire life. I believe he understood it better than anybody else. He could decipher it and read it better than anyone else alive today. There are many people out there that will vouch and support this statement. People that I have met in my travels and my research that have worked with Zechariah Sitchin, and all have exactly the same thing to say about the man before he died, that he was a master of his trade. He knew exactly what he was doing. While other people are not necessarily as well trained or don't have their own interpretation. And what I'd like to say is that I'm not saying Zechariah Sitchin was right 100%, but he gave us his interpretations, which at this stage seem to be more accurate than anybody else's interpretations.
Exactly.
I have looked at, for example, the thousands and thousands of pages of translations on Oxford University website. And what strikes me, and what will strike anyone that looks at that work, it's as if you have a bunch of grade 1 students deciphering or writing about Shakespeare. That's what it sounds like. You let a bunch of grade 1 students loose, and they don't quite understand what Shakespeare wrote, but they write volumes and volumes about it, missing the point completely. And that's the difference. I have a lot of experience in teaching children how to read. I've developed literacy programs in my life, and I've had great success in teaching children and adults how to read. And in the process of teaching children how to read, there's a fascinating progress that happens, and you recognize how the children grow in their understanding of the language and the letters of the alphabet, and how they start getting to different stages of understanding and comprehension. When I read the translations on Oxford University and other people's translations, it often feels as if I'm reading very young people's literature. Translations of people that can't yet read properly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can.
And that's the difference between Sitchin's work and other translations. Sitchin could read it well. Other people are still struggling with it. And I'm not the only one saying it. There are many learned scholars who are far more trained than I am in this subject that say exactly the same as I'm telling you now.
Yeah, and on top of that, all what he's writing about is actually found by you in South Africa. I mean, the gold mining, the Anunnaki. So that is another very strong claim that his interpretation does make a lot of sense. What is your view, What is your view, Michael, on the planet of Nibiru and the home planet of the Anunnaki?
That's a fascinating story and a very good question, because I know there's so many millions of people that want to know. What do you think of Nibiru? When is Nibiru coming around? And has it been, or is it still coming? I have no idea. I really don't know. It's very difficult to work it out. But there are some interesting things that have happened in the past. There have been some fascinating video clips that people have posted on YouTube that make no sense. There have been news reports around the world about the second sun. I'm sure you've seen some of those reports.
I did, yes.
And they seem very interesting and very credible. Now, not many people will look at the sun and wonder if there's a second sun next to it, because how often do you look at the sun? You don't really look at the sun, right? But the whole Nibiru thing is fascinating, but I want to come back to what you said about Sitchin and my discoveries, and that's a very important point and a very valid argument, and I use it all the time, is that I have discovered by some strange sequence of events the physical evidence that Zechariah Sitchin describes in his many books. The lost, vast, vanished civilization at the southern tip of Africa that he refers to in his books as the Abzu, and the Abzu is where the gold came from. He makes it very clear that Abzu was the name given to the land where the gold came from, that was the shape of the heart, and all these things start to weave together. And he describes the technology of the Anunnaki. He describes the gold mining empire, and I have now shown beyond a shadow of doubt that Southern Africa, especially South Africa and Zimbabwe, is this vanished civilization that is inextricably linked to gold mining. There can be no argument or doubt about that. And we have these millions, more than 10 million mysterious stone structures that all give us energy, that are all connected, that are all generate huge amounts of energy that were linked to these gold mines, and there are hundreds of thousands of gold mines that we have discovered. So, and that's just one aspect of it. Then we talk about Great Zimbabwe. We talk about some of the technology that Sitchin describes that I've discovered using sound frequencies. We talk about Adam's calendar, which I call Adam's calendar, that Zechariah Sitchin describes in his translations. The evidence is now so compelling that the probability that he was making it up is virtually impossible. The probability factor far outweighs the possibility that he was wrong.
Exactly. So it's very difficult to debunk this because the evidence is right there, and the remainings are very clear. Can you tell us a little bit? Sorry. And just to maybe add to the planet Nibiru, there is one very interesting thing that happened. Probably it's more than a year and a half ago now. On Google Sky, there was a section of Google Sky that was blacked out. I don't know if you are aware of that. Yeah, I saw it in the constellation of Orion, I think, if I'm correct. Yeah. I can't remember exactly where it was. I looked at it, and it was very, very beautifully, clearly, blacked out. You can see the big rectangle that was cut out actually cut some stars in half. Exactly. But there were people that actually took shots of that part of the sky, and in that part it showed very clearly either a planet or a brown dwarf or a star of some sort that was moving towards planet Earth or towards our solar system, and it had either planets or moons around it. If it was a star, there would have been planets. If it was a giant planet, it would have had moons around it. I don't know which one it is, and that part of the sky is now gone. I'm not sure if there were any astronomers that have gone and looked at that part of the sky with their telescopes and can verify that. I haven't found anything like that, but it's very suspicious that they would go to so much trouble to black that part of the sky out. Yeah, I fully agree, and I was really fascinated in those days, so I did a lot of research myself. But yeah, like you say, there must be some amateur astronomers who are capable of looking very precisely and see what's coming towards us. So, and that was more than a year ago. So yeah, I'm a bit confused. Yeah. So hopefully there are some amateur astronomers or professional astronomers with really amazing equipment that will be listening to this at some stage and will be able to give us more information, because I'm sure there are millions of people who would love to know what that was. Was it a planet? Was it a brown dwarf? What is it? Exactly. Yeah, and Sitchin talks about a cycle of 3,600 years. So, yeah, I did some calculation, but I came up with around 2013. So next year would be a more likely year that it would come back again. So, yeah, and also we need to remind people that it's like a slingshot. As it gets closer to the sun, it'll speed up. And it'll speed up, and then come around the sun, and then be spun out into space again, and then slow down as it goes out into deep space. Slow down, so its journey around the sun is a lot quicker than its journey in deep space. Like a slingshot. So don't forget that as well. So it's not an average speed that it would travel. No, it speeds up incredibly towards the closest point to the aphelion. It's called the closest point to the sun. Yes. Great. Can you tell us a little bit more? That was a question I want to ask you about the calendar, the Adam's calendar you call it. What exactly does the calendar calculate? All the visible lights and perhaps even more?
Yeah, the calendar is, it is just an incredible site. Probably one of the most important sites in all of human history, for various reasons. Because first of all, it's the flagship between or in the middle of more than 10 million circular stone ruins that are all connected with channels built out of stone and terraces that hold them all together like one giant spider's web holding the whole thing together. Those are all energy devices. And Adam's calendar is just a name that I gave it when I was first introduced to it in 2007 by Johann Heine. Johann Heine rediscovered this site in 2003 by accident when he was flying over it, and he recognized that this was not just some strange collection of stones, that it was actually, there was an intelligent design behind it. So he came back and he started measuring it and observing the movement of the sun, and he realized that it is aligned with the north, south, east, west, the cardinal points of planet Earth, that it is aligned with the movements of the sun, the equinoxes, the solstices, and other things. You can tell exactly every day of the year between the summer solstice and the winter solstice by a shadow that is created between the two central rocks. The one rock casts a shadow on the other rock, and that shadow moves from the one side, from the summer solstice, right to the other edge of the rock, which is the winter solstice, and then it stops and comes back. So you can tell every day of the year by this calendar, and it still works. It's slightly out of sync because the rocks have moved over the extreme period that it's been standing there, and I also think that it was probably affected by the flood, the Great Flood between 12 and 13,000 years ago. It might have actually moved the rocks a little bit. But but it's still accurate. You can still tell the day every day of the year if you put marks on the rock, and it'll be very accurate. But that's not the only thing. The two calendar stones that are right in the middle of this circular structure dissect the north-south line perfectly. So the north-south goes right between the two calendar stones, and the calendar stones can be described like two metal plates, actually, that stand, next to each other, and they create like a vibrational effect between them. But it's perched right on the edge of a cliff that looks down into the valley, drops down about 750 meters into the Barberton Valley. It is aligned. There is an alignment in the calendar that links to the rise of Orion's belt. There are three rocks that mark the rise of Orion, and the rock that is placed exactly east that marks the rise of the sun is very clearly carved in the shape of a bird, like the Horus bird. So not only do we have an accurate ancient calendar, but we also have the same symbols as we have in Egypt. We have a Horus bird that looks at the rise of Orion, and the belt of Orion, the three stars of Orion, are aligned further in the valley with three pyramids. Two big pyramids and one very small pyramid that you can hardly see. It's actually completely covered by soil. So we have a combination of rocks and structures that are very reminiscent of what we find in Egypt and other parts of the world.
Exactly. So you could say this was the original one, like also what you describe about the Adam's calendar is maybe the original one for the Stonehenge formation. So can you tell how old this is? Because I believe you claim that the civilization of mankind started 300,000 years ago. Have you any idea what time this calendar structure was created, the circular stones and the calendar stones?
Yes. First of all, Johan, all the stones that the calendar is made of are a rock called dolerite. It's a very hard rock. It peels like onions when it gets old and is exposed to the elements. And some of the rocks, and these rocks do not belong here. They're not part of the natural rock. They were brought from somewhere else.
Okay.
So already that tells us that this is not a natural rock protrusion. It was intelligently designed, and the rocks were brought from somewhere else. The erosion on the rocks is extreme. Just the one piece of the one calendar stone that has fallen, that is broken and fallen off, the erosion on the edges tells us that that piece broke off probably about 50,000 years ago at least, and it starts to point us in the right direction. The alignment to Orion's belt has been calculated by two different astronomers of about 75,000 years, and another astronomer dated it to 160,000 years. How they did their calculations, I don't know. I didn't ask them about it. I just accepted their findings, and that's what I present. But that's just an indication. The very important thing here is that the north, south, east, west alignment of Adam's calendar is actually out of sync with current north, south, east, west. And I'm talking true north and south is 3 1/4 degrees anti-clockwise in the original calendar. And that's not possible, because true north on planet Earth stays the same, right? Magnetic north moves all the time, but true north and south is the axis mundi, is the axis of the Earth that stays fixed. And yet, the north-south axis and the east-west axis of Adam's calendar is out by 3 1/4 degrees anti-clockwise. And that's not possible. So what it tells us is that this calendar site was constructed at a time where north, south, east, west was not in the same position as it is today. And it suggests that the Earth has undergone what Charles Hapgood was teaching us all his life, what he called crustal shift or crustal displacement, where north-south actually shifts. And I believe that Adam's calendar is geophysical evidence of that kind of event having taken place on planet Earth. There's absolutely no, it's a scientific fact now. There's no doubt about it. And it needs a lot more study. It needs a lot more bright minds and people that have open minds to come and look at this and study it and explore it.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah, because
we know that it's very old. We know that it was built before a crustal displacement or some sort of a geophysical effect like that. But we don't know when that geophysical effect or event happened. So it's difficult to say. However, let's get back to Zachariah Sitchin. In one of Sitchin's books, he has a translation that says more or less the following. It says, 40 Shar after arriving on Earth, Enki built himself a special place of observing on the edge of a cliff in the deep Abzu, in line with the Twin Peaks and his abode in the north. So, what that tells us is that 40 Shar, first of all, what is 1 Shar? 1 Shar, you mentioned already, is, according to Sitchin, is 3,600 years. Right? So, if you multiply 40 by 3,600, and you subtract that from the 435,000 years that Sitchin says the Anunnaki arrived on Earth 435,000 years ago, and you subtract 40 Shar from that, you end up with around 285,000 years ago. And that is what I claim Adam's calendar, the age is of Adam's calendar. And another great, beautiful piece of translation from Zachariah Sitchin, he had no idea that we will find this site when he made that translation.
No.
And what's even more interesting, this piece talks about the Twin Peaks, or the peaks. At this stage, I believe that the pyramid in Giza was not yet built. So I think that translation was referring to the pyramids that are aligned with Adam's calendar in the valley below, and not referring to the Great Pyramid of Giza. And the reason I mention the Great Pyramid of Giza is because Adam's calendar, Great Zimbabwe, and Great Pyramid of Giza are all aligned along the 31 degrees east longitudinal line, the ancient Greenwich Mean Time, or the Nilotic Meridian. So that translation, some people would interpret it as maybe referring to the Great Pyramid of Giza, but I don't believe that the Great Pyramid of Giza existed at this stage. That it was the pyramids in the valley below Adam's calendar. And remember also that Adam's calendar is linked to ancient African tradition as being the place where the gods created the humans.
Exactly,
according to the great African shaman Credo Mutwa, who was initiated at this site. It was not called Adam's calendar at that stage. He was initiated there in 1937 as a young shaman. And when I showed him my book on Adam's calendar, 4 years ago now, he just started to cry like a child. He was uncontrollable. And he told me that he never thought he would see that beautiful and special place again. And he was very happy that it was now discovered and that people knew about it so that we could actually try and preserve it and protect it. And the Zulu tradition, according to Credo Mutwa, they call it Inzalo Yelanga, which means birthplace of the sun of the gods.
Well, yeah, it's so important what you have discovered and what you're bringing out. This shows our origin of mankind. But I also understand that there is not really well accepted by the universities. Can you tell me how archaeological scientists from universities deal with your discovery? How do they look at your research?
Unfortunately, they don't deal with it at all.
No.
They completely ignore me. They've not only ignored me, they've been saying really nasty things about me to the media. Whenever the journalists go and talk to them about my work and what I've been writing about, they always have negative things to say. And yet not one of them has actually studied my work. Not one of them has actually been to the site. Not a single one of these so-called scholars or archaeologists or historians has actually taken the time to go to the site. So they talk about it and they know nothing about it, which is just an indication of their ignorance and also their arrogance.
Yeah, or maybe there's something behind it. I don't know. Let's go a little bit to Ubuntu, because I want to talk about that as well, and then we can come back to the ancient discoveries. Because something really horrible happened 1 month ago with your lawyer who's doing the lawsuit. Can you tell the listeners what exactly happened? I saw your video, and I will put a link on the radio, on the broadcast, so people can see the video you made. But can you describe what happened, Michael?
Yes. Well, for your listeners that don't know, I've been actively involved in South Africa for just more than 2 years now in legal action against the banks, specifically against a bank called Standard Bank, the oldest bank in South Africa and the most powerful bank in Africa, and basically trying to show up their fraudulent activity, the fact that they're just a bunch of gangsters, and opening the eyes of the legal system and the judges. And we've had very little success for the first 2 years, but that is suddenly starting to change. And we're starting to get small little victories along the way. We have not yet had one judgment in favor of any human being. The judgments are still going in favor of the pieces of paper, the corporations, and the banks, by ignorant judges who just don't understand what we're talking about. But that's changing. And what has happened in the last 3 months or so, several of the banks have pulled out of some of the cases against them, when they realize that there's actually a possible chance that they may not win. So they pull out of the case, or they abandon the case, which is actually a victory for us.
And then they settle with money, or how they can pull out then?
Well, yes, they either settle with money, or they just abandon and leave it hanging. Just leave it hanging. Because remember, most of the cases are cases that the banks have initiated against the people. So when they withdraw, they don't have to settle. They just withdraw.
Okay.
So they don't need to settle any money. They withdraw, but their withdrawal is a victory for us because it's a precedent that they withdrawn from a case that we're arguing ourselves.
Exactly.
And I've been involved in 3 Supreme Court hearings that I represented myself against Standard Bank and the highest paid lawyers that money can buy, and it took them more than a year in the Supreme Court of South Africa to finally get a judgment against me where I believe the judge was bribed because he had a pre-written judgment. When the time came for him to read the judgment, he just pulled a piece of paper in front of me and read the judgment as if he pre-prepared it.
Okay.
It was incredible. The whole court just went, what? Nobody could believe what they were witnessing. But nevertheless, that has resulted in my application to the South African Constitutional Court, and that created a lot of attention here. But the Constitutional Court threw our application out before they even heard it, or they even heard the bank's responding arguments. And the Constitutional Court basically said that we have no prospect of success, which is like a joke, And that led to then us opening a new case of rescission of judgment, which is currently an active case. So I am now the applicant, and I've also launched a summons against Standard Bank of 5 counts of fraud. So I am now the applicant against the bank, where previously I was the defendant. So now everything has changed, and we're only going to go to court in February next year. That's when we've set the court date for. In the meantime, Scott Kundal with the New Economics Rights Alliance is about to launch this week a High Court interdict against all the banks, signed by 160,000 members of New Economics Rights Alliance, an interdict against the banks from any further executions or repossessions of homes and cars until a trial has been heard. So between myself and Scott Kundal in the New Economic Rights Alliance and several other people that have done similar things to what we're doing, we have pretty much brought the banks down to their knees. And I think we're very, very close to a victory, finally. But what has now happened is they realize that they are really in trouble. And this is where they start playing the dirty games. And we believe that the banks are behind this. They send 10 armed thugs to our lawyer's home, and they basically overpowered him, tied him up, and kept him at gunpoint for 3.5 hours, kept beating him up with a gun, and made it look like a robbery. Took the TV, took a laptop, and did a lot of damage to the things they were taking. Clearly not worried too much. But when it came to taking Raymond's computer and the backup drive and the hidden secret backup drive that they knew exactly where it was, they took very great care to remove it without damaging it. And then they went through all his legal files, hundreds and hundreds of legal files. The only files that were missing at the end of all of this was my file and Scott Kundal and New Era's file. So it's very clear what they came for, and tried to threaten us, and unfortunately did Raymond a lot of damage. But he's bounced back and he's stronger than ever before. The guys that actually broke in and held him up have now been arrested. Raymond was the legal advisor to the South African police and the South African Defence Force for about 20 years. So he's got a lot of connections in the security forces and the special services. So he pulled a lot of favors with people that he's known for many, many years, and this has resulted in the guys being arrested, and they're now awaiting sentencing.
Whoa! So this maybe starts to backfire on the people who hire them, and if you can prove that it is indeed the Standard Bank, then I think you have a really strong case.
But it's we're dealing with real organized crime here. I mean, it's real. It's a serious organized crime. This is the largest legalized organized crime syndicate in the world. Is the banking industry.
Yes.
And they have the biggest thugs available and the most advanced techniques to get rid of people. So this is why we've been keeping this as high profile as possible in the media and not keeping it quiet.
No, bring it in openness, so that's powerful.
Absolutely.
And I saw on your email that you're also part of the Freeman movement, like myself. Can you explain a little bit what you're doing? Because you also say I'm Michael of the family Challenger. So it's really, my heart went open when I saw that, because I saw that you do a lot of stuff that I'm also doing. So, but you're it's your show, so please tell your story, Michael.
Yeah, look, many people will not be familiar with the free man movement, but as time goes by, I believe they'll wake up and realize that that's really where the whole truth needs to go, towards that everybody is born free. And then after we're born free, suddenly all our freedoms are curtailed and are taken away from us. And we're forced to obey rules and regulations that we didn't agree to. We're forced to work and earn money. We didn't agree to work and money and pay taxes to governments that we didn't agree to adhere to, and these civil liberties, or these liberties that we are born with and the freedoms that are born with, are basically immediately taken away from us. But I don't want to delve too much in that. So yes, I'm part of the free man movement. Scott Kundal and I have been part of it. In fact, that is the main reason we started getting involved with the banks.
Exactly. Yes.
Was from a free man perspective. But then we realized, as we started going to court, that the free man approach wasn't going to really get us anywhere. So we had to very quickly adopt a different approach and say, look, if we use the free man approach, we're just going to get laughed at and thrown out of court, because they're going to make it look like we're crazy. And unfortunately, the uninformed members of the media would probably think that we are crazy, because even when we started our case against the banks, arguing that they steal your promissory note, that they sell your promissory note into securitization, that they profiteer, that they don't have money that they lend you, so they break contract law. And when they sell your promissory note, they lose all rights to your property. Therefore, they cannot come after your property and take it away from you and sell it. And so that's fraud, and it's actually theft, and all these things. So even the media, when we started arguing this, under normal legal arguments, the media was still writing about us in the newspaper that we are just confused and we're trying to wangle out of debt, But that is now 2 years ago, and things have changed. Suddenly the media has woken up. They realize that what we were saying 2 years ago is actually accurate and true, and more media is now getting behind, mainstream media getting behind us. One of the biggest television shows in South Africa, called Carte Blanche, is going to run, I think, a 3 or 4 week series on this. And this is the highest watched TV show in the country.
Wow.
And this is going to really shake up the tree more than ever before. It's going to be incredible. It's going to completely blow open the whole fraudulent action of the banks. So we're looking forward to that. And that's going to help us with our case early in the new year.
Well, that's a great success, Michael. So maybe this 2012 year is actually going to really change a lot on this planet.
Yeah, I believe it's doing that already. It's definitely laid the foundation for something interesting to happen early in 2013.
Yeah, great. Okay.
And as a result of this, just because you mentioned our lawyer, but I've been involved in creating a whole new movement called the Ubuntu Liberation Movement, and the Ubuntu Political Party, which is now a registered political party in South Africa on a national level, and will be contesting the national elections in 2014. So that's also something that I'm very actively involved in, but unfortunately it's a costly exercise. So we urge everyone that's listening to this who has a few cents to spare every month to go onto the Ubuntu website, ubuntuparty.org.za, and make a small contribution to the party, so we can go out and print brochures and distribute pamphlets and distribute material to the people around South Africa, so that they can inform themselves about their rights and the free man rights and other rights, the fact that the government has stolen the country from its people, and we the people need to take it back.
Yeah, great. We had an election in September, and I was party leader of same kind of Ubuntu party, the different name of course, but it's a perfect way to reach out to more people. So I'm really happy that you do that. I'll put a link to that website also under this broadcast, so people.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah,
thanks very much, man.
Yeah, because I see most people say you shouldn't be involved in politics, and politics is bad and things like that. But it's also a way to reach out to many people who are still fully unaware of what's going on. So and every.
Well, I get it now. We've just done an Ubuntu meeting here in my little town of Watervalboven, and in Johannesburg 2 days in a row, and that's why I'm really tired. And I've driven about 1,000 kilometers in the last 3 days, and done 2 big presentations. But people say, oh, so now you're going into politics, so now you're a politician. And my answer is no, I'm not a politician. I never want to be a politician. I have no desire to ever be a politician, because I despise politicians. I see myself as a teacher, teaching people about their rights that have been destroyed by the politics and the politicians of today.
Yes.
So see me as a teacher. I will tell you a few things. I will teach you a few things that you don't know, and then you must take it further and do something with that knowledge and that information and liberate yourself.
Marvelous, marvelous. That's exactly the kind of words I chose too, because that's what it's all about. But it's very great. You mentioned the town you live, Michael. Do you know what it means? Because it's Dutch.
Yeah, Watervalboven, of course.
Yeah.
And there's Watervalboven and Waterval onder. Waterval onder is where Paul Kruger had his little house that he commanded, or that he stayed in for about between 3 and 6 months towards the last part of the Anglo-Boer War, where when the British threw the entire might of the British Empire at 60,000 Boere on horseback. And if they didn't build concentration camps and throw the children and the women in the concentration camps, and if they didn't burn the farms and apply their scorched earth policies, they probably would have been beaten by the 60,000 Boere on horseback. And you know what it was all about. This was 470,000 British soldiers in 1900. Think about that.
Wow.
470,000 British soldiers. There are fewer soldiers in Iraq and in the Middle East war at the moment. There were more British soldiers in South Africa fighting the farmers than there are soldiers in the war in the Middle East today.
So it must have been extremely important for the UK to seize control.
Exactly, and you know why that was. It was always about gold, about the gold.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fascinating, actually. Since we're talking about Paul Kruger, remember that when Paul Kruger was president of the Transvaal Republic,
mm-hmm.
and at that stage the gold had not yet been discovered in Gauteng or on the Highveld. It might have been the early days of discovery, but they certainly hadn't discovered. It hasn't been mined in any large numbers. Most of the gold in those days came from the area that I'm in now, the so-called Eastern Transvaal, Pilgrim's Rest, Barberton, and so forth, and also Kaapse Hoop, strangely enough, where Adam's Calendar is located, or in Zalo Ilanga. That's where the biggest gold nugget was found in South Africa, just more than 5 kilos gold nugget.
Wow.
And so the question is, where did Paul Kruger get all his gold from? And no one has really asked that question before, because there wasn't that much gold around. And what did the British know about the gold that they put so much effort into it to prevent the Boer from keeping control of the gold? Something strange was going on here.
They must have had some insight. Yeah.
I can tell you what I believe that strange activity was.
Please do.
Because of the royal political bloodline of the Brits, they knew about the Anunnaki and the ancient gold mines.
Mm-hmm.
They knew about the thousands of underground tunnels that are filled with gold still today. They knew that Paul Kruger discovered some of those underground tunnels that were filled with gold, not human gold, filled with gold from thousands of years ago, left behind after the flood had destroyed everything. He accidentally found some of those tunnels and found huge amounts of gold. That's what the British were after. Not the little bits of gold that they were mining in the little mines in the year 1900. There was nothing.
Makes sense, Michael. Yeah.
That did not warrant or justify such an incredible force, military force, and conviction to put everything behind securing this part of the world so that it would not be controlled by a small bunch of farmers. And I believe it was far more mysterious than people realize.
And let's go back to the Anunnaki and the gold quest, so to say. What is your explanation? Why did the Anunnaki need it? Some people claim it was used to put for the atmosphere of the planet. Others talk about monoatomic gold for a kind of...
Hello? Jan, I think I lost you there.
I'm sorry, yeah.
I lost you there for a few seconds.
Yeah,
it's a very good question. And the question, I think, that probably has many interesting answers itself. My personal belief at this moment, and that belief may change in the future based on the information I get, but my current belief is that the Anunnaki are probably best described as the fallen angels who became obsessed with physical form and physical beauty and immortality. And because they had advanced knowledge of the laws of nature, they had advanced knowledge of teleportation and traveling through space, they had advanced knowledge of transmutation and so forth. They discovered that in their physical form, white powder of gold was, or monoatomic gold, was the substance, because it is the only one of the platinum group metals that in its monoatomic state fluxes at body temperature. So it heals you, it gives you immortality, it gives you absolute perfect physical form. I believe they became obsessed with the physical body, physical form. I also believe that on a conscious, spiritually conscious level, they were far inferior to human beings today. They may have had the advanced knowledge and the technology, but their consciousness was much lower. And that is the interesting thing, is that the creature that they created, the Homo sapiens, or the human beings, or the Lulu Amelu, the slaves for the gold mines, the slaves have outgrown their masters in consciousness. And this is the big problem we have on earth today, that they're desperately trying to stop and to reverse so that we lose our higher levels of consciousness and we regress in consciousness. And they're doing everything they can through poisoning our food, poisoning the skies, poisoning our water, putting fluoride in everything, putting aspartame in soft drinks, and causing our brains to deteriorate, and they're trying everything to reverse our growth in consciousness, not realizing that that's impossible, because the growth in the explosion in consciousness comes from the activation of our DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying retarding processes to stop our DNA from evolving and being activated. So I believe that the Anunnaki, probably when the Bible talks about fallen angels and ancient cultures talk about fallen angels, I think that the Anunnaki are probably the closest description to these so-called fallen angels that abused their knowledge for their own benefit, and they became obsessed with it. Their ego took control, and they used it, and they would do anything to abuse their power and their physical form for their benefit. And then the white powder of gold, when Zechariah Sitchin writes about the fact that they would beam it up with skyships into the heavens, it possibly has several meanings, and I believe that they used the actual white powder of gold, the monoatomic gold, as a form of energy, because it's a very highly energetic substance, right? You know all about that. I believe they used it not to create a protective shield, as Sitchin calls it, around their planet because of the cosmic rays and the ultraviolet rays and cosmic rays and so forth. It was actually something similar, but they actually created it, turned it into a shield, an energetic shield, to protect their planet against other advanced beings from seeing what they were doing, or observing or detecting what they were doing with regard to exploiting other planets for their own physical benefit. And that monoatomic gold could have been mixed with something else or used on its own. I'm not sure at this stage. And it was possibly used as, I believe it was used as a shield around their planet. But I also believe that Nibiru actually is part of a dual planetary system. There are two planets that revolve around each other. It's not just one planet. And the one planet is shielded, it's virtually invisible, and that is the planet that they were protecting for themselves, while the other planet is shown as the decoy, or the fall planet, if you want to call it that. That's the information that I've got at the moment. And that's why the obsession with the monoatomic gold.
Yeah, it makes very much sense the way you explained it, Michael. So I'm really happy that you did that, because there's a lot of wild stories on the internet. But this is that's really what I really like about you. You're very down to earth. You talk about things you can understand, which makes sense, and you don't go into any speculation. So that makes it more credible and more easy to take in, so to say. And
for people that don't know about white powder of gold, there really is probably not more than 2 or 3 people in the world that are experts on that. And one of the experts is David Hudson, and who actually researched it with the guys at MIT in the United States, who did experiments in the laboratory with white powder of gold under conditions of the highest technological observations. The only reason we haven't read anything about it is, as David Hudson explained at my conference in Johannesburg, the UFO Science and Consciousness Conference that I hosted here in November 2011, just a year ago. David Hudson explained that because mainstream scientific laboratories can only write reports on things that they can explain. They will not write reports on observations in the laboratory that go outside the normal, understandable laws of physics. If something happens that they cannot explain according to the normal, standard laws of physics, they cannot write about it, and they will not write about it, and it will not be published. That's it. That's how crazy the situation is. So as much research as they did, and as David Hudson writes about and talks about, you will not find anything written about it by these institutions. And it's fascinating because David Hudson talks about this white powder of gold, how it reacts as a white fluffy powder inside a tube of inert gas. I think they use argon gas in there. And when you hold your hand underneath it, the little clump of white powder lifts up and starts to float. Because what that tells us is that we ourselves, as human beings, have monoatomic elements inside our bodies that are dissolved in our blood and in an interstitial fluid, and possibly other parts of our bodies that's possibly part of our bone structure. So we actually have monoatomic elements in our bodies, and this is why when you consume monoatomic elements, they actually help to align and strengthen your body. And it's specifically the white powder of gold that does that, not the other platinum group metals. And between 700 and 800 degrees, when they heated it up, at 700 degrees, this little pile of white powder starts to disappear. In front of your eyes, starts to disappear. At 800 degrees, it's gone. It's vanished. It's not there. Now, you cannot explain that with mainstream physics. And this is why these guys wouldn't write anything about it. And so this is important. If for people that want to know more about it, it's probably one of the most fascinating subjects in science and metallurgy, because it's directly linked to human origins. It's linked to Moses and the Exodus from Egypt, and the manna from heaven, and what the Egyptians called muftak, or what is it, and there's white powder, or the bread of God that was fed to the Israelites. Well, why was it fed to the Israelites? Because they were a dirty bunch of people. There wasn't much water and much food. So they probably weren't very clean, and they weren't very hygienic, and they were probably riddled with disease. So the one way to keep them clean and keep them free of disease was to give them this white powder of gold so they would stay healthy.
And again, this perfectly makes sense. Wow, it's really fascinating, Michael. Yeah, I experience the same difficulty with mainstream science. The old paradigm is so hard that it's very difficult to break free from that. So at a certain moment, that old paradigm will collapse, and then a new paradigm will arise. But until that, it will try to deny and try to ignore as much as possible everything that doesn't fit in that old paradigm. So. Yeah. And that also proves shows why your work is not yet accepted, and the same is true for my work. But the times are changing. I'm very certain of that. So we are just pioneers, Michael, trying to show the world that a different view is possible, and that view is telling us much more about our origin, and is helping us also to keep our planet much more in balance than we are doing at the current time. So. Yeah. Can we, for the ending of this show, go to the BEM conference, the Breakthrough Energy Movement? You were also there. You gave a lecture. What was your impression? You were in Hilversum, in the Netherlands.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. It was just such an inspiring weekend. I'm still on a high, buzzing from it, because I met such incredible minds and incredible people under one roof, discussing free energy, new solutions for future energy problems, and so many brilliant ideas and thoughts that came out of that. I'm just really excited to have been part of it. And I think the reason I was part of it, why they invited me, was because of my discovery here of these ancient stone circles, which I mentioned at the beginning of our discussion tonight, is that the stone circles, the more than 10 million stone circles in South Africa, are all energy devices. In case people don't get it, let me make it very, very clear to everybody. They give us infinite amount of energy. We can power the entire world and more with the stone circles in South Africa. They give us huge amounts of electromagnetic energy in the form of sound frequency that somehow gets converted into electromagnetic waves. And that is the part that we don't yet understand, and yet it's right in front of us. It's been measured. I've measured it more than once. The results are stable. They repeat every time we measure it, and it goes off the charts. The sound frequencies that we measured, the electromagnetic waves that we measured are unbelievable. They are energy generating devices. All we need to figure out is how to use that energy in our lives today, and we will have an infinite supply of energy. And what I get very excited about this is that it seems to be sound frequency that is the source of this energy, because it somehow, sound seems to be the primordial source of all things. The Bible tells us this. All ancient cultures and religious and philosophical beliefs talk about sound of the Creator that was before anything else. So the sound actually is a precursor to electromagnetism, and the same happens in the stone circles in South Africa. The sound frequencies that come out of planet Earth give the shape to the stone structures. That's why they resemble very specific cymatic patterns, and those cymatic patterns are then responsible for creating the electromagnetic waves and motions.
Well,
and start thinking about sound as a possible source of free energy.
yes, it was a little hiccup, Michael. Part of your sentence went away, but it's really fascinating what electromagnetic energy. But did you say a couple of million stone circles you have found in South Africa or in even Zimbabwe? Whoa,
yes, there are more than 10 million of them. So it's not, it's not just a few hundred or a few thousand. More than 10 million of them. So when you realize that we're dealing with a vanished civilization that we know absolutely nothing about.
Yeah, and we should, because it's our origins, and they also have all the keys for solving all our problems at the moment. So it's very important that we focus on getting that insight and explaining everything what went on in those days, and help us understand what they did, because then we can also become gods ourselves.
Exactly, but also realize that we don't need physical, we don't need gold, we don't need iron. We can become gods because we are gods already, and we have surpassed those that created us through consciousness. Our consciousness is exploding now, and this is unacceptable to them. I believe that is really the big problem that they face, is they're desperately trying to stop our growth in consciousness.
Yeah, but it will be in vain, because it's already going on as you described, and that's the beautiful time we live in now, because we are going through the roof, so to say.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. Michael, it was a real pleasure to talk to you, and I'm sure the listeners enjoyed it as well. Maybe you can come back in the future again, because there's a lot of more information you can share, I think. But we'll stick to 1 hour as we agreed. So thank you very much again, and listeners, thank you very much for listening to Pateo Radio, and maybe you'll join in next time. Bye bye.
Thanks very much, Johan. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye.
Well, there's a reason for my teaching, even though I can't explain. More than a dream that you are reaching, more than a laugh that shadows all the pain. A special meaning in the thorn of dreams, in the garden where a thought can blind me. 'Cause I am lost here, where it never gleams, where I found that I screamed so blindly. Yeah. Until I rise up, fall down. Is this the reason that I can't feel the ground? Am I waiting for my tomorrow, or should I say goodbye? Yeah. Well, am I walking with a purpose? 'Cause I feel the same, and as As I wait for my dreams to surface, as I wait I'm drowning in the rain. Just when I thought that it was over, I lost my grip and I hit the wall. A simple dream that I tripped over, now I have to wake up to my fall, until I rise up, fall down. Is this the reason that I can't feel the ground? Am I waiting for my tomorrow, or should I say goodbye?
Dit is Ergens Oog Radio.